The prayer for teacher and student. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Punuktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astoma Vrittishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with a great energy. May our study be illumined, and peace, peace, peace be unto all. So the subject, what is yoga, is in a way, it's a repetition of a theme that I have put out before. And recently, of course, over the last few years anyway, I've been addressing yoga groups and asking this same question, what is yoga? And I'm also asking it in conjunction with another question, what has yoga to do with health and wellness? And most of the groups that I address will say, well, everything. And my answer is, well, hardly anything, hardly anything. So there is this diversion of understandings, which we could broadly speak of as East and West, where people in Western countries, by and large, not always, but there is a flavor that says that yoga is associated mainly with a physical culture system, a culture of physical exercises that really is called Hatha Yoga, and many variations have taken place. And no doubt this is a yoga, but what is the meaning of the yoga? And the term yoga is a Sanskrit term that has two roots, yaj and yajir, both meaning something similar. And we get the English word yoke or join or conjunction. All of this comes from this root. And so we can remove much of the confusion, as I have said on many occasions, by replacing it with the vernacular term union. And then we see at different levels, we find unions. Of course, we find trade unions, a kind of unity of purpose to do with social rights and connected with work and connected with the rights of labor. So there's on that level. Then we find union of different other types. We find union in relationships. We find also disunion in relationships as well. We find unity and we find disunity. We find unity of purpose. We find relational unity in, for example, marriage. And we find unity in terms of uniting all the forces within the body. These are the physical harmonies that we can cultivate. And this is the health part of this unity. But really, what we mean by yoga is twofold. Not only the goal of and purpose of what is seen to be life, as ultimately a realization of unity, in spiritual terms, what is called a mystic union, a discovery that there is a united condition, as it were, that is always there. Even the word condition we find an apology for is not conditioned. It's simply a state of isolation. And in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, which is the aphoristic textbook on the philosophy of yoga, philosophy and practice of yoga, we see that the last chapter is to do with this independence, this isolation, this kaivalya, as it's called. And this kanda, this portion, really takes us to the highest conclusions. Now, if we take this Patanjali Yoga Sutras as a kind of handbook, textbook on our pilgrim journey in a dualistic sense means it is, philosophically speaking, a philosophy that holds that we are an individual soul, if you will, an individual life monad, and that there is a collective thing called nature. And these are the two components. And ultimately, when we've isolated the mix of the one with the other, the confusion, the identification or misidentification, when that problem is solved, this is called the kaivalya. So broadly speaking, it is a similar philosophy to that of dualistic Vedanta or any of the other dualistic philosophies that have the same purpose. And so it is not really a union in the final conclusion, because a union means that two separated things became united. But we can use the term, of course, in many different contexts, which then gives rise to many, many types of yoga. So one question that came from here was, so there are many yogas, many types of yoga. We know of one or two, but there are many, many. Yes, that is true, because it simply means this union. Yad something that yokes or joins things together, and also something that joins the attention to the object of attention, that is also called yoga. And in the context of the practice and philosophy of yoga, that is its meaning. Yoga is concentration. And so in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, this aphoristic handbook which is there, we can't make sense of it because it is an aphoristic text. Sutras, mere threads, sometimes a word, sometimes two, sometimes a phrase, and requires commentators. I have in front of me two famous commentaries. One is a commentary on the commentary, and they belong to Vyasa and Vachaspati, called Vachaspati's Gloss. And there they go into great detail. What did the teacher mean when he gave us this teaching? Because unless you have some explanation or some kind of living commentary that goes along with it, then you really won't know what was spoken when these sutras came out. Sutra, a mere thread. The surgeons use the term sutya, which comes from the same root. A mere thread that we can follow. And we can follow it systematically because it helps our memory when we have trigger phrases that evoke whatever was discussed. And so the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, that I don't intend to go through in terms of the whole lot, just a brief overview, but it begins with this, Ata Yoga Anushasanam. Now concentration or yoga, in that sense, concentration, is being explained. Now, normally our attention is dispersed everywhere and is not united. What unites our central individual sense of purpose is what we call ego, or sense of I, a kind of central organizing capacity within us that identifies ourselves as separate personalities with separate tastes and separate temperaments, and all that fits together in a kind of harmony, what we call dharma, because we can't all be the same. We are constitutionally different, and thank goodness for that. The glory is the appreciation of the differences, not the sameness. When we learn to appreciate all the differences, all the different kinds of personalities. Next month, we're having another Enneagram and Essence of Truth workshop. And the importance of this is, it highlights what are the differences, why are they there, what will we do about it, and how can we coordinate all of this so that we can all work together in greater harmony. And so we might say that, you see, the Yoga Sutras, consisting of the 4 chapters, nearly 200 sutras, it's really part of an aphoristic kind of literature that is a contracted form that is easily enables students to memorize things. Then the second sutra goes like this, very famous, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, that yoga is the restraining of the mind stuff or the chitta from taking various forms of vrittis. And this is one of the most misunderstood sutras in the whole of this literature. Let's try to misinterpret it instead of interpret it. Okay. You see, the first sutra will indicate that there have been many, many explanations. And maybe there have been understandings and misunderstandings, but now there's a fresh understanding put in a very detailed way, put in a way where when you add the commentary, there's a systematic progression. Now, previously we did a guided meditation and used all of these progressive steps. Just to summarize what they are, the first one is love. And the first step, vitally laid out as part of one of 8 steps, is really to emphasize this aspect of love. In fact, the Yoga Sutras in one of the places will tell us that we have to cultivate certain qualities in our waking life. We have to cultivate the quality of friendship to all beings. We have to make sure that we are friendly to everybody. That in itself is difficult for many people because, you see, when we divide people according to our individualities, we put them in one of 2 categories generally, maybe 3. One of them might be those who are our friends, who comprise our mutual admiration society, who agree with us on everything. And there are those who don't. And there are those who oppose us. And there are those people who create some scandal against us or some libel against us. And our thought process will be one of revenge, possibly. But you see, it is all to do with the condition of the mind. And the condition of the mind will always be disturbed if that is our way of thinking. And all of the systems of yoga, no matter what they are, will have this aim in mind, which is encapsulated in this second sutra. So, our characteristic of being friendly to all, cultivating that, what is the basis for it? Well, the basis for it is severalfold. Firstly, it is a much better technique of getting on with people. You see, if you go into a street and you don't know anybody, and you say hi, make some kind of conversation, you'll find an immediate response. I was in Northern Ireland yesterday, and of course, when you get past the Northern Ireland accent, so people don't have a bad hair day there; they have a bad har day. So the hair is hard. That's how I remember the kind of Northern Ireland accent. But you see, just asking people for some directions, or I was at the railway station and I needed to charge up a phone, as we often do, with modern technology at our disposal, and I couldn't find at the railway station there. I couldn't find a PowerPoint, so I thought, well, this is a Belfast railway station, central. Must be something like that. And I asked somebody, and they vaguely pointed out a few points. And I asked the security person, I said, my phone is charging at this one point. He said, oh, no. Here in this cafe. And he pointed out all these points. And he says, you select your point, I'll look after your phone. And then when you're ready, when you've put your stuff there, bring your phone across. And he said, oh, by the way, we only share the information about these outlets with our favorite people. So instantly I made a friend there. I never met him before. So it's a good technique. It's a good way to get on with people, is to be friendly. On what basis? On the basis that people are people who have the same difficulties, the same problems, the same issues, but primarily they're on the same journey. We're all on the same pilgrim journey to discover our own immortality. Asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyoti gamaya, mrityo amritam gamaya. Lead us from the real or the unreal to the real. Asato, the sense of non-existence, that is a sense of mortality, the sense of a relativity, to that which is absolutely permanent, that which never disappears and goes away, represented as a transit between darkness and light, the darkness of ignorance to the light, the glorious light which is there. And then from death to immortality. All of these are variations of the same theme. And so we're all on this pilgrim journey. And if you've ever been on a pilgrim journey with other people, you'll be considerate for those who are struggling. You'll assist the elderly. You'll try and provide some transport for those who can't walk any further. There are some people who go and do the Camino in Spain, maybe 1,000 kilometers. And people somehow pick up a sense of bonhomie because they're all on the same journey. They all have the same kind of blisters. They're all looking for accommodation at night. When I was doing the cycle ride for 620 kilometers or so and was stuck on the road, a cyclist came along and immediately stopped. Can I help you? And it was through his help that we managed to get things going. Intrinsically, people are like this. Often we see the dark side of people, but intrinsically, people respond to a sense of friendliness. So, friendliness to all. Compassion for those who are struggling, who are not successful. Joy for those who are successful. Well done. Lack of jealousy. So based on these qualities, now these are not just the human qualities that I have elaborated on. The fundamental reason and base for it is that we are all fundamentally the same. The unity is already there. First of all, we're all human, yes. Secondly, we're all living on the planet Earth, and the consequences of not getting on together are disastrous. But more importantly, we have a common basis. And this common basis is the self, what is called the immortal self, or what devout worshippers call God. And so, what is yoga? Yoga is the art of sportfully staying attuned to the glory of this self, or what devout worshippers call God. Now, the art of sportfully tuning into it implies the absence of all negativity. And so we know, if we take up the fourth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, we find the very significant statement that the art of staying attuned to the glory of self is there. It highlights the individualities. The fourth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita will indicate very strongly some very important points. Now, I mentioned the Bhagavad Gita because the Bhagavad Gita is a textbook on yoga. And when I address these groups, who largely may be yoga teachers, it seems a compulsory part of their 18-month training that they will study these Patanjali Yoga Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita, it being a textbook on yoga, after each chapter, we see the evidence of this. Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Supanishatsu, it says. Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Supanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastri. It is a Yoga Shastri. It is a scripture on yoga. And then after each chapter, he tells us about the content of it. For example, Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvadi Karma Yogo Nama Tritiyo Dhyayaha. That is the ending of the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So yoga is so there are 18 yogas. If you ask how many, and it's a trick question I ask people, how many yogas are there? Well, we know Hatha Yoga is there. Yes, okay. We've heard of Kundalini Yoga. Okay, yes. Anything else? And then I point out this term that it is a union. And mainly in terms of its practice, it is a union between your attention and the object of your attention, otherwise called concentration. And so concentration is being explained. That's the first sutra. Second sutra is this yoga is the restraining. Now, by restraining, it doesn't mean pushing it down. But mind stuff is there, and Swami Vivekananda, in his commentary on this sutra, gives a very long explanation to try to help us understand the geography of the mind. So let us put it in simple terms. Imagine that the whole of our observable universe is a series of waves or oscillations, subtle things that we cannot perceive, Let us take, for example, the simple phenomena of light. We know that we break down light into photons, particles of light, that have wave characteristics. How do we know the wave characteristics? Because when light goes through water, you can see that it is being bent, as it were. There's a bending thing going on. In other words, it's like a wave. And we can see that all these variations of photons, all of these things in the electromagnetic field, they're all in frequencies, amplitudes. And depending on the variation of frequency, we see different things. For example, when we see blue, it is a short wavelength. When we see red, it is a long wavelength. And this is the spectrum that we see. And we're using the language wave, and we're also using the language of photons and particles. And this is one of the great mysteries in our modern physics. So let us assume that these fundamentally everything is waves. That means then that in the mind, there's also something like a lake. There are also waves there. But like any lake, there can also be calmness there. And these kinds of waves are threefold. And the whole of nature has these three evolutionary forces that we call binding forces or ropes called gunas. Not exactly qualities, but also substances as well. Because when you say a quality, for example, white or whiteness, you have to say, is it white paint, white milk, or whatever it is? And so these three evolutionary forces are there in the mind, and they surface as, let us say, the mood of laziness, lethargy. When we find that there is disease in the mind, or disease in the body even, the enthusiasm of the mind goes down. We become torpid. We become a little unenthusiastic, a little lazy. But then there are moments where we feel alive and enthusiastic and energetic. And the characteristic of both of these things generally for your own benefit. There's an egoistic aspect of it. Why do I want to do activities? I want to do it for me, for my benefit. Now, we're not saying that these are morally good or bad. We're leaving that out of it. We're simply saying that these are disturbances in the mind. And all of this interrelationship will give us pain. And so we have to understand that the way of dealing with it will be very individual. No two individuals are quite similar in their tastes and their temperaments. That is why we do this Enneagram, to highlight these different tastes and temperaments and say they're okay, by the way, but the energy which is there needs to be diverted into something that is useful to you and useful to others. And these higher values, these are come under a category called sattva. And so restraining the mind stuff, chitta, from taking waves that disturb the mind, we have to engender their opposites. We have to bring up counter waves. And this art of bringing out counter waves frequently, so frequently that they become the dominant waves, is the art of yoga. That is the art of concentration. The process is concentration. Leaving the mind to do what it wants, the indisciplined mind will not solve your problems. And so yoga, therefore, is also called viyoga, because you see, yoga becomes technically that, because a separation from wrong thinking. It becomes like that. And since the self, which is there, which is described as Atman, or in yogic language, Purusha, is all-pervading and ever-present in everyone's heart, there's no effort needed to bring it in. It's not that it is a stranger. It doesn't have to be invited from distant land. There's also the direct statement in this 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita that it is the Lord himself who has taken the form of what we call the jiva, the soul. The individual self in the world of living beings. Actually, you find this in the 15th chapter. A portion of myself has become every jiva. Jiva implies life, a living entity, a living soul. We are all jivas with an accumulation of experience that we call our unconscious mind and our personality, an accumulation of subtle impressions, and ultimately a body that matches it. And so the individual self in the world of living beings is there, and philosophically speaking, of course, ignorance consists in the failure to grasp this very idea. And so when we go about our so-called normal activities and ignore this great and vital truth, we get into difficulties, because it is ignorance really that causes our pain. Supposing you sit down and say, oh, nobody likes me, I feel miserable, and I feel hurt by what this person said or that person said. What is the cause of it? The cause of it is this misidentification called egoism, and this comes from our ignorance. What is the antidote? Knowledge. How do we get that? Through concentration. And so this is the taking the chitta, this mind stuff, is taking these various forms. And these forms are called disturbances, waves, oscillations, vrittis. But instead of understanding that nature is really producing them for us, which of course it is, there is this insertion that we have the capacity, unlike any other aspect of nature, of controlling them, of steering them, of making sure that they have a calming effect. And what is the use of that? Well, the use of that is once all the disturbances are gone, then all the pain is gone, and then all the combative tendencies are also gone, the reactive tendencies are all gone. There's peace of mind, and in that peace that passes all understanding, there we find a self-revelation. We have now induced a condition where the revelation of the truth happens by itself. And all of these practices, whether you call it meditation, whether it's karma yoga, whether it is worship, whether it is ritual, all of these things really are to do with this calming and purifying and clarifying this chitta, this mind stuff that has been drawn from all the eternal energy, if you will, of the universe, and localized in this way. This chitta related to the world chit, consciousness. And so this chit and chid and chit, these are related terms. This chitta, says Swami Vivekananda, is in every animal from the lowest to the highest. It is only in the human form that we find it as the intellect. What is the intellect? It's not a self-governing thing. It's not a self-perpetuating thing. It's not an independent entity. The intellect is part and parcel of a combined makeup, part of an aggregate of the mind. So what is the geography of the mind? Well, we have the sense organs internally that replay as imagination, dream, daydreaming, etc., visualization. All of these are there. And there are 5 kinds of these waves that disturb the mind. What are these waves? According to the Sankhya philosophy, 5-fold, and yoga adopts the same thing. And this is the true, something that is valid and true, something that is untrue. Then there is verbal delusion. Verbal delusion means we think in words and we image making, our imagination jumps to a conclusion. And the jumping of the conclusion causes pain because inevitably it's wrong. We have to get the wrong end of the stick, as we say. And this causes us tremendous difficulties. And then, of course, there is sleep and there is memory. And you ask, what about dream? Well, dream is sleep plus memory. Now you have 5 kinds of waves that are commensurate also with the 5 brain wave types in the brain. And so the intellect is just a reflection of the one that is the knower and the thinker behind everything, what we call Purusha, the immortal self, what in Vedanta we call Atman, simply self. Purusha, the real person behind all this other thing. And so until this mind stuff can take the form of the intellect, It's not possible for it to return through all these steps that will get our liberation, the liberation of the soul, which is our aim. You get some religions who say our aim is heaven, or our aim is a post-mortem condition where we're happy. No, what we're saying is you can get this happiness now. It's not as if there's something to get. You already have it here. You just have to realize it. Immediate salvation is impossible for the cow or the dog, says Swami Vivekananda. And although they have mind because their chitta cannot as yet take that form which we call intellect, and the chitta manifests itself as scattering, darkening, gathering, one-pointed and concentrated. He's taking it from the commentators that I've just mentioned. So let us take them one by one. Scattered mind. We all know what a scattered mind is. A darting kind of energy dispersion which jumps from one thing to another and is very often accompanied by erratic activity that has no systematic process within it. So the scattered mind means all the mental activity is not focused in one place. We are all privy to scattered light. If it wasn't for scattered light, we wouldn't be able to see the individualities. But then there is the opposite of it. There is a darkening. And then there is a gathering. In other words, there's an effort to stabilize the waves within the mind. But then there is one-pointedness, ekagra. It means then that we have made an effort. Now we have a modern analogy for it. Supposing you take all the scattered light beams, all the photons, and systematically beam them in a concentrated way in one direction, it is like a laser beam. And concentration has this effect. It is a revealing factor. Any great discovery was accompanied by this concentration, this one-pointedness, and then this concentration. And so the scattering form is activity, and its tendency is to manifest in the form of pleasure or of pain, because these are two opposites that we swing against and toward. We want to avoid pain and we want to go toward pleasure. And we think this is a good formula, but it's not very stable, because every pleasure is followed by an absence of it, which we can also call pain. And I've just given the definition. And the definition comes from the other textbook, the Bhagavad Gita, that in fact, yoga is technically a separation from pain. It's vi-yoga, technically, is what it is. So, the darkening, he says, the darkening form is dullness, which tends to injury. And the commentator that he's quoting says, the third form is natural to the higher beings, the devas, if you will, a substratum of parallel individuals that are by their nature shining. And the angels and so on, every religion has them and has people who have seen them. And the first and second, that is the scattering and the darkness, is common to demons in mythology, those of a demonic nature, those who are materialist in their outlook, those who have no moral compass as a result of their view of the world, which is purely physicalist or materialist or reductionist. And the gathering form is when it struggles to center itself. And we've all tried to do it, to try and make some kind of stability in our life and our minds. And the one-pointed form is when it tries to concentrate. And the concentrated form is what brings us to a condition of transcendence, a condition of supreme, perpetual, stable concentration, where a sense of separation is absent. And at that time, when things are concentrated, tadadrastaha swarupa avasthanam, at that time, that is the time of the concentration, then the fundamental entity that is seeing and witnessing all the activities in various fields, mental field, physical field, the objective field of the world, there is some entity that is witnessing and seeing and observing all these things at all the time. This is called Purusha. It rests in his own immediate state. And this is beautifully described in the Bhagavad Gita as the body as a city of God, if you will, and a 9-gated city. Katha Upanishad will mention 11-gated city. It's a very, very beautiful, beautiful concept. And so systematically, we are told what is yoga as a systematic process. And it also steers us away from misunderstanding of what is yoga. Now, where does this Hatha Yoga come into it then? Where does this health and wellness come into it? Well, it comes into it in what I've just mentioned. Supposing you re-register the body and say, and remove the term I and mine. You take the registration office and say, I wish to re-register this body. I wish to re-register this building. And say, okay, there's a new owner. Actually, it's the old owner, but I was looking after it. And I thought I was the owner, but I'm looking at the deeds and I see, oh, actually, it belongs to somebody else. Who does it belong to? It belongs to that indweller of the city, whose characteristics will be never born, ajna, never avyakta, not crooked, avakra, not disturbed in any way, constant, whose consciousness is unflickering, something like that. And I realize this is the real owner that is giving life and ownership and performance and activity to what we call this body. That means I don't do anything. And there are various shifts and changes. We find it in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita that sometimes the Lord says, well, I'm in everything, but everything is not in me. And sometimes the position is switched and changed, seemingly apparent contradictions, but they're not really contradictory positions because there's no one stance that will cover everything. It gives us multiple ways of looking at things. This is a great advantage. So we can have to learn to systematically shift our point of view as the situation suits. Sometimes we can see, oh Lord, you are sitting here in this 11-gated city, or Bhagavad Gita is 9-gated city, leaving 2 gates out. And so what should I do? Well, if you have a house, what will you do? You'll make sure it's clean and painted on the outside, and you'll make sure there's interior decoration on the inside, well furnished and looked after and cleaned. And so Patanjali lays out these 2 fundamental primary conditions for this concentration, for this yoga. And they are called systematically things that we should control. These are universal things with 5 categories. And this is elaborated in some more recent Upanishads. There's a group of 20 Upanishads which are Yoga Upanishads. They're not generally studied because these are seen to be minor Upanishads. There are some significant detailed aspects to these minor Upanishads. For example, a suggestion of breathing exercises would take place in one Upanishad, which is quite famous. It is called the Yoga Tattva Upanishad. Yoga, we know. Tattva means a technique, or it means an important way or element, if you will, a divine kind of element. If you use the Sanskrit root yaj for yoga, which means to add or to join or to unite or to attach, then you'll see that yoga tattva will be a compound of the word yoga. And tattva will indicate thatness, suchness, truth, all of those kinds of things. And so The term, of course, Upanishad is knowledge. So this minor Upanishad will give us an expansion of the fundamental Eightfold Path that Patanjali lays out. It'll give a little bit more detail, including details of asanas, postures, and so on. The whole purpose of all of these things will be only one, and that is this final sense of uniting, this final sense of unity that we already have, a condition that is already there within us. And so the body as a city of God, what would you do? You'll make sure that it is disciplined, and then the observances are there, purification of body and mind, cleaning on the outside. The instruments that we have are external and internal. We can classify them like that. External is the body and the objects that it relates to, and internal is the mind. So we learn to clean the body, and the way to do that is to move the lymphatic system around through asanas or postures that condition us to be able to sit in Siddhasana or Padmasana or any of the meditation postures comfortably. And this is what Patanjali means. Asana to him means a seat that you can sit on where the body doesn't disturb you. And if you are concentrating on all your multiple physical ailments, then you cannot be concentrating on the central theme of unity or God or the eternal self. And so for this reason, we should surely keep the owner's house in order and make it clean. Not just through exercise, but also through diet and right thinking, primarily right thinking. Right thinking and right activities, right exercise, right food, right diet, and all of those things. And so asanas, that's where it comes into the purification. This is the answer. What has health and wellness to do? What has yoga to do with health and wellness? Hardly anything. However, it comes into it, no doubt, not for its own sake, but for the sake of tuning up our instrument and making sure it is still a fit instrument for us to get around obstacles. When we get around all the obstacles, then we have found the fundamental truth that transcends everything of our own being, in ourselves and others. We have found God. We have found the eternal self. We have gotten knowledge. And you can do it through love of God will produce this knowledge. So to the unillumined, the physical body is often, maybe even a hindrance. But some use it to taste pleasures and exercise power. This is yogic language for this is bhoga and aishwarya. But to the enlightened, the body is re-registered as God's 9-gated or 11-gated city. The Katha Upanishad adds to the navel and the royal entrance at the top of the head. To the unbound one, the Lord, whose unwavering consciousness abides as the witness, meditating on him, says the Katha Upanishad, the aspirant attains freedom and surmounts all grief. And this essentially is yoga. But there are necessary steps toward the goal. The ancient teachers and scriptures attributed parts to the partless. We can't start off by saying the ultimate has no parts, we leave it like that. No, we have to bring it to our level where space is an important dimension for us. We acknowledge it. And so we take things step by step. The author of the Panchadasi refers to the technique of step by step. He calls the scriptures the well-wisher of the questioner, whose mind is still filled with the ideas of space, time, numbers, parts, and evolution. You know my famous statement, so I don't believe in evolution because I believe in totality. And totality has no change within it. It's a totality. And a holistic view that is more and more properly cultivated will give us this aspect. And so such a mind must be led gradually to dwell on the infinite. And so this is the use of scripture. This is the use of teachers. The partless, the timeless, the non-evolving, perfect one. See, the wise guide slowly guides the mind towards the ideas of penetration, transcendence, and unity. All these three things. And all-inclusiveness. And so the student's insight reaches its zenith when the duality of the perceiver and the perceived all disappear. Initially, we start off like that, and we use that. And the resulting awareness of this union means that there's no second to it, which is no second to oppose us, no second to fight, no second to feel hurt. What will act on what? That's the question when that unity is there, or who can cause whom to act. And so these are brought out in the Gita, in the chapter 5, who can act on what. When we transcend the sense of duality, we have outgrown our immaturity. We have outgrown our sense of individuality, and we've outgrown our pain. It's not to say that pain is not there, but we know how to deal with it. We can have a sense of equilibrium about it. Somebody criticizes me, it goes like water off a duck's back. Even-minded in pain and pleasure, in praise and blame, in hot and cold. Such a characteristic one will be a yogi. So the feeling of this immanent presence makes the person fit for the revelation of the supreme truth. And providing the condition for that is called the practice of yoga. Now, admittedly, such great souls that have had this experience of transcendence, so to speak, they're rare indeed, there's no doubt. But we're all pilgrims traveling along the road to it. And for this reason, we should all be compassionate to everyone struggling. The enlightened are those who get there, but they should be the only ones to wield power. And if we read the Bhagavad Gita, we see a yoga of action which is emphasized. It's not to say, oh, the transcendent existence is all there is and there's a non-duality and we shouldn't do anything, we should sit, we should be lazy. No, that is dullness and ignorance. We should take up whatever occupation is available to us immediately, and we should not ignore our skills and talents. If the wise, you see, Krishna says, I have no reason to act at all, but if I stop acting, other people will follow, and the world itself will stop. What's the point in that? And so the wise will have to conduct the ideal of work and be active, efficient, and at the same time aim for the welfare of the world. And this will be the fulfillment of their individual designed purpose. And we have to acknowledge, of course, that there are different types of devotees with different types of yogas, therefore, to suit them. But the most common, the most convenient, and therefore the best is recommended in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And that is love of God. And many religions, most religions, the Abrahamic religions will emphasize this. What must we do to gain the kingdom of heaven? Love the Lord thy God. In fact, Jesus doesn't answer it. He puts the question back. This is, what do your scriptures say? Oh, you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. In other words, take all your energy, dissipate it normally, and concentrate it on this one thing. Replace all your little loves with this one love. And that will yield then everything that is to yield. And so to them who are ever steadfast worshipping me, says Krishna, with love, I give the yoga of discrimination by which they come to me. But there are those who are predominantly intellect-based people who will want to approach things in an analytical, philosophical way. That is one way, and they will gain this love. There are others who are extremely active, and they should transmute all the energy of their activity into a non-disturbance of mind, into this equilibrium which we call yoga. And then there are those people, the vast majority of people, who are sensitive, who respond to love, who wish to love and be loved. And that love then should be steered in a higher, noble way. It should be pure. It should be selfless. It should be all-giving. It shouldn't be concerned with any reciprocation. And so all of these are there, and these have the effect of controlling the supreme enemies of desire and anger. And in doing this, we have to have the art of promoting the one wave that has the neutralizing effect of the others. Promoting sattva, it has this effect. So Patanjali goes through in a scientific way all of these things, starting off with the principles of the first chapter or portion, and then going to the practice, which is the second portion. And there the practice is eightfold and put over quite simply, but we have to acknowledge it's not so simple to practice. In doing this, he says that we should offer the fruits of our activities to what is called Ishvara, that is described in the yoga system as the ancient teacher, and in him becomes infinite and all-knowingness, which in others is only a germ. And this is a supreme ruler, a supreme knower, not the conventional God we think of. He's the teacher of even the ancient teachers. He's not limited by time. And his manifesting word is Om. But it doesn't end there. Just repeating Om, Om as a universal sound for God does not do it. And so he says, and meditating on its meaning. The repetition of this Om is the way, and meditating on its meaning is the way. Tad tapaha tad artha bhavanam. Repetition of this Om and meditating on its meaning. Any mantra that we have, we should understand and be involved in its meaning. It has to be accompanied by the feeling. The meaning evokes a feeling. It is the sound embodiment of the highest principle. And so in the guided meditation done earlier, we started off with a threefold repetition of the sound symbol Om, explaining that it is the primordial emanation of divinity that expresses itself in the entire world as the entire world. So this is a brief overview of the subject of yoga and what it is. And so I started off by saying there seem to be these two divergent views of yoga, popularly put. And one will be emphasizing hatha yoga that could unfortunately make us body conscious. The other aspect of this is even the hatha yoga, the physical aspect of this, is designed for one thing in mind. And that thing is the ultimate pilgrim journey toward one goal of freedom. And anything that is in the way of it should be eschewed, should be spat out, should be avoided. And so yoga is not only the goal, but the process. It is a unity, it is a union. And so we should fully understand it in this way. The yoga approach is one of 4 approaches distinctly identified in this Bhagavad Gita. And one of the Bhagavad Gita is one of the Kristanatraya. Interesting enough, when I ask yoga practitioners in the Hatha Yoga sense and teachers also, what are the scriptures, yoga scriptures that we should follow? Very often they don't really know. Some of them may say, oh, Patanjali Yoga Sutras. And then some may also say Bhagavad Gita. And then you ask, have you studied either of these texts? Oh, I forgot. I learned it when I was training. But these are the most important texts which brings us to the practice. And so you see in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, for example, we find this Janena Tvanim Pashyanti Kichit Atmanam Atmana and Anye Samkhena Yogena Karma Yogena Chapare. Some behold the self in themselves through the purified mind by meditation. others by the path of knowledge, and yet others by the path of action. And still others, not knowing these ways, worship as they have heard from others. And they too go beyond death by their devotion to what they have heard. And so it is the path of meditation that is commonly understood as a practice of yoga, but it is only one of them. We find in the Bhagavad Gita that the first few chapters are dedicated to the most important thing for modern man, and that is karma yoga, doing all activities without any anxiety and being detached from the effects or fruits of these activities. In other words, surrendering the prophet-actor complex to its rightful profiteer and rightful actor, namely the Lord of the universe. And then the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, leading up from the 5th chapter, would be on meditation. Now you have these two systems, two approaches, two yogas. And then, of course, from there, let us say the 7th chapter to the 12th chapter will be all to do with the bhakti yoga, yoga of love of God, worship of God, devotion, taking your heart and surrendering it to the Lord of the universe. Fixing your mind on me is the phrase oft repeated in the Bhagavad Gita in this context. And then from the 13th chapter onwards, what will we find? We'll find Jnana Yoga, the yoga of intellectual pursuit, not just intellectual pursuit, but understanding, yoga of understanding through the practice of discernment discrimination. Recently, well, when I say recently, in August, there was a big international conference. Well, it was a European conference of yoga, and I happened to be invited as a guest of honor there. And I put a challenge out. The Bhagavad Gita has one chapter dedicated to discrimination, viveka, because the theme of the whole conference was viveka. Beautiful. And so I don't know what happened. Probably Google researches happened. I don't know. All kinds of things happened. And they were at sea. They couldn't understand. What was it? Well, what it is 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where a distinction is made between the relative and the absolute, the knower of a field of activity and field of our experience, called kshetra, field, and the knower of the field, kshetrajna, and the remarkable statement, know me to be the knower in all the fields, only one knower. Supposing we are able to see this unity within everyone, our outlook will be different and it will be transformative, because we'll be able to see things in a different light. The fact of seeing that will have a penetrating effect, so the truth of that will penetrate through and come and condenses our reality in this world. And this is the way we make the world a better place, through this discipline and practice of yoga. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you. Well, all the yogis can go home now. Thank you. You see, we're all yogis. We just don't know it. Some people say, "Oh, do you practice yoga?" Yes, as you do. No, I don't do yoga. Yes, you do.
Did you ever hear of Hatha yoga?
Yeah, this is Hatha yoga I've just described.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The yoga pertaining to the self, isn't it?
No, Hatha yoga is really a series.
No, oh, sorry, did I say Hatha?
You did say Hatha yoga.
No, sorry, Adhyatma. Adhyatma yoga.
Adhyatma.
Yes. It's not the yoga pertaining to the self, to oneself.
Well, Adhyatma is essentially the primary self. That's the meaning of it.
Sorry, I don't know why I say
primary self. Yeah. Well, all yogas are to do with the Adhyatma. And you see it's mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, these classifications, not as yoga, but as classifications. What is the Adhyatma is the question asked. What is the Adya Devata, and so on and so forth. All of these questions are answered. But you see, it means that wherever we look, we find the glory of the divine. We can't see it directly, and therefore we take any aspect of the glory of the divine, which is the entire universe and entire existence, and with a special artistic eye, understand, okay, it's like a thread that will lead me to the divine because it's a manifestation of it. We can't see it as something separate. Our inclination is to do that, of course. We see people we like, we dislike, we analyze personalities. This person has a bad vibration, this person has a good vibration, this person is talking against me, this person is talking for me. This is how we split it up, no doubt. But this is really just an elaboration of our own biological nature, which is crude and dedicated towards survival, biological survival. So we can think differently. And what is the different way of thinking? Well, the different way of thinking is to see that real self there, inside everything, and penetrating through everything like rays of the sun penetrating everywhere. But then to register it as everything gives us a very different view. It's not inside, it's not through, it's as that, because there's no difference. When we get that unity of experience, then all these difficulties will be bypassed. We learn to stand there. What I say is learn to stand where you normally stand and deal with the world as the divinity within everything. But learn also to shift your attention and see you can stand in a poised place internally and sit, if you like, on God's throne and see things as God sees them. Why not? That's your fundamental nature. See things as He sees them. And God made the world and saw that it was good. He didn't find any room to complain.
He writes his own reviews.
Writes his own reviews and acts in his own plays and directs his own thing and designed the plot. He wrote the play, he acts in the play, and he sets the stage, and he is the stage, and there's nothing other than he.
And he's the audience as well.
And he's the audience as well, and he's the lighting, and he's the prompter, and he's everything, and he's the makeup artist, and he's everything that exists. And when we start to cultivate that view of things more and more and more until it becomes second nature, then our outlook on the world is transformative for ourselves and for the world around. We're able to then transform discord into harmony. I heard all kinds of things about me today, which surprised me. And so my internal comment was, well, I'm not prepared to eat from the same trough, okay? The big trough, if you like. Elevate the mind, don't drag my mind down, and let me not drag yours down either. Let us elevate each other's minds to the highest level. And continuing from what I started, Patanjali Yoga Sutras, cultivating friendliness toward all, joy for the successful, all right, compassion for those who are not successful, who are a little down, who are in pain and feeling miserable, and indifference to those who are dedicated to virtual vice. It means no scope to criticize anyone, actually. And feeling always a systematic feeling of contentment. We can cultivate these properties based on a sound philosophy, sound basis. Then things will change. When you smile at somebody, they will smile back at you, unless it's a hideous grin. All right. Good. Thank you.